Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. The Lady and the Little Girl. Hi, my name is Rosie. This happened to me in a rented house that was about 100 years old. What happened is one day me and my husband were having an argument. I left the house to do some shopping, and my kids were with their dad. My husband was left alone in the house. I was so angry. I wanted desperately that whatever was in the house to spook him because I had already had a few experiences. Believe me, I so repented. I shouldn't have done that. Because when I got home, he told me, while he was eating his breakfast, which he had left on the dining room table, that he heard like if pots and pans were being thrown around. He went to the kitchen and saw everything was fine, but he got really scared. He even talked to it. He said whatever that had done this, to be on its way. Then there was our neighbor, who was a very weird guy. Often late at night, we would hear him cussing and kind of fighting. And we thought at the beginning that he was just talking to himself, but later on, it turned out that he was fighting with the actual house. Well, this made me laugh, but it also frightened me a bit. What I did was dangerous, but yet I felt he was not in danger because I knew that the spirit of this little girl that I had seen in the apartment hated arguing. But who or what this entity was that made my husband change that day, I really don't know, because I don't think it was the little girl that was throwing those pots around in the kitchen. Then one day we were ready to leave the house and go shopping. Again, me and my husband are having an argument. I had left something in the house. I went back in to get it. When I opened the door, from the corner of my right eye, I'm looking into the living room and I see this lady. She's yelling. She's very close to me, but her voice seemed like it was coming from far away. And she's saying angrily, "Men are idiots. They're not worth anything," and just cursing. I just went and got out fast because I did not know who she was. But I think that she was the one that made my husband uncomfortable in the house. He hated the place. I told him he had to be careful because the little girl hated arguments and that this lady might have been provoking it. Well, one night, the ghost of the little girl is moving my arm, so I get up, I went to my kids' room, woke up my daughter to see if she was fine, and she was okay. So I went to my room and slept again. Again, she wakes me up, but all is fine. I told the little ghost girl to stop. She did, but then it started again. So I told her to go bother someone else. Well, she did. It was my next door neighbor. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I hear him trying to close the door of his house, but he couldn't. He was so mad and I could hear him cursing. And one night, I had to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. While walking to my room, I felt something pushing me to the wall. I ran so fast because everything was totally dark. I went to my room, turned on my room light, and peeked out into the hallway to see if I could see something out there, but thankfully I saw nothing. This really scared me. I felt like I was being targeted. Told my husband I had to find out what or who these entities were. Just so happened that the next day outside of our house, I see a neighbor passing by. I stopped him. I told them that I've been seeing really strange phenomena in this house and told him what I had seen. He asked me to describe what the little girl and the lady looked like, and then he started to cry. He said that the lady was his wife and the child was her granddaughter. His wife had died of a mysterious disease and that the child had also died of some other type of sickness. He told us his wife was a very outgoing person and kind of a loudmouth. Well, that was her description. I always knew the ghosts were not from this house. The owner of this house are our neighbor's family. Well, at least that explains it. But what about the eerie sound of children crying that I sometimes hear in some other occurrences in the house? Those, so far, I haven't been able to explain. The spirit in the bathroom. There has been so much going on in this apartment. I've lived here for 5 years, but lately so many things have happened that I don't know what's triggering it. It seems that there are many more incidents and that it's escalating. My daughter and I used to sit in my bed to watch TV. Several times we would feel something knock against the bed as if it was under the bed. The cat was asleep, so it wasn't the cat. I've heard footsteps when no one was about, and they seem to stop before I can see who it might be. About a year ago, I felt something put its arms around my waist while I was sleeping. I could feel their warmth. That wasn't scary, but it was weird and unsettling, because if you think about it, how could a spirit be putting out warmth? In the past year or two, sometimes my bedroom fan will work fine, and other times it makes noises and drags and won't speed up. Our stove started ticking about 2 weeks ago, like the timer might have been stuck. In the next few days, it accelerated, got fast and noisy. I investigated, turned up no cause, and now it stopped on its own, and it seems to be back to normal. The other night, I was sleeping and felt someone grab my legs between my feet and knees and shake them as if trying to wake me up. I was terrified and could hear myself crying out, more whimpering than crying, and I had the hardest time waking up. It was like I felt that I knew what was going on, but at the same time, I couldn't wake up. But I did. And then, once I was awake, I had no problem moving. Last night, while on the computer around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the living room next to me. I seriously thought someone was coming around the corner and freaked. I stood up and thought, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to protect myself? Then the steps stopped short of coming around the corner of the room where I might see them, and I got up and, of course, nothing was there. So last night, after going to bed, and I must admit I was pretty upset by the goings-on, I went to sleep and felt someone pulling my hair, grabbing different sections of my hair and pulling fast and hard. I remember trying to grab my hair and crying out. My daughter was sleeping in my bed, and I was whispering her name like I was afraid to call out, and I just scooted over close to her and went to sleep. Or maybe I just never woke up, I'm not sure. It was so real, and I don't remember if I woke up or never did at all. Then, just today, it happened. I was sleeping, and I felt it all over my bed. I screamed for it to leave me alone in my dream, and then I thought to tell it to move to the light, and then I woke up. Then I thought it might be someone I knew, and I told them not to be afraid, that I forgave them. I said again to move to the light. I got a little freaked out, so I sat up in bed, turned on the light, turned on the computer, turned on the TV, anything I could think of. After a couple of minutes, I heard the wastebasket in my bathroom move across the floor. I wanted to be sure, so I went and looked and wasn't positive, so I moved it back to where it had been. Got in bed. I had to be sure that it had moved. Put it back to where I had found it after the noise and realized that yes, it had been moved. There's no doubt in my mind that I heard it move. It's glass on a ceramic tile floor, a very distinct sound. I'm beginning to think that by sleeping with the light and the TV on, it's being foiled and not able to approach me. But then again, how much sleep do you think I'm getting? All I know is that maybe this thing is just getting mad because it can't get to me. And now I'm really starting to worry. The widow's house. I know our house was bought from a widow. I'm not sure what happened to her husband. That might have something to do with these encounters. I often hear noises or feel a chill around me. I thought it must be my imagination. But I couldn't think that for long. One evening, my friend and her twin brother came around to my house. Me and my friend chatted. My younger brother and her twin played pillow fights in the eaves of my room. Then the boys came out of the door and said that the light had gone out. The bulb was not there, so we assumed they had knocked it out. We could not find it, so we got my mom. At first, she could not see anything, so we emptied everything out, but nothing. Later, when my friend had gone, I opened the door to the eaves, and lo and behold, there was the bulb sitting right in front of me. No cracks, no marks, just like someone or something had gently unscrewed it. Now, one day, I found out that before we lived in our house, someone had died there. I know I have had some encounters. This is one of the incidents that happened. One day it was just me and my mom in our house. I was on my computer and I heard a bang upstairs. I thought nothing of it, but then I heard a bang downstairs where I was. I asked my mom, "What was that?" She said, "I'm not sure," but I then thought it must have been a ghost, and I know that sounds weird, but seriously, it was. Then another night, I was in bed. I couldn't sleep. I don't know why. It was like something was stopping me. After tossing and turning for what seemed hours, I finally found a comfortable position facing the wall with my back to the door. I was nearly asleep when suddenly something poked me, and I didn't know what to do. Then, another time, I was in the shower and something knocked on the door. The handle went down like someone was trying to get in. My brother and dad were out and my mom was outside. Another day, I was in my dining room and I was sitting down on the sofa playing a game on the GameCube. It was dark outside because this was at night, when all of a sudden I see a ragged-looking old tramp out of the corner of my eye. Just for a second, I looked and he was gone, but the strange thing was that he was looking at me and he looked very scary, and I don't really think it was my imagination. Then I've come to the conclusion that the safest place in our house was the study, or so I thought. One night when my mom and dad were upstairs putting my brother to bed, I was watching TV. The commercials came on and I put the sound on mute. That's when I heard it tapping on the keyboard like someone was typing. I thought nothing of it until one day my dog went up to the leather chair where my dad sits when he's working. He jumped on it and licked it, whining for attention, but no one was sitting in it. Strange or what? I really don't know. Is it one ghost? Is it a lot of ghosts? And at this point, who knows how many other encounters I'm going to have with this spirit. Trailer park ghosts. When I was 7 years old, I lived in a trailer park in Wisconsin. It was a small trailer, but that's all my parents could afford. It had a small kitchen and a small living room and 3 bedrooms. A hallway was connected to all 3 rooms. I had to share a bedroom with my sister. We also shared a bed. One night when I was asleep, I woke up with my bedroom door open, and when I looked out, there was a small girl outside my bedroom door. I thought it was my sister at first and was going to tell her that it was bedtime when I accidentally bumped into her right next to me. I realized it was not my sister outside the door. I sat there staring at her and she stared at me. I screamed and the little girl disappeared. I woke up the whole house. My parents came into the room to see what was wrong. I told them that there was a little girl outside of my door. They did not believe me and told me it was just a dream. I believed them. I went back to bed eventually. Then another time, I saw a ghost, and this was when I was in my parents' room sleeping with my mom and my sister. I was looking out in the hallway when a man materialized before my eyes and appeared to be floating forward, but he didn't move. I just stared, hoping he would go away. I put my head in the pillows and then eventually fell asleep. I didn't tell anyone about that, afraid they would say it was another dream or that I was seeing things. The last time I saw a ghost was when my mom was in the room. I saw a woman watering a plant, but there was no plant there, just a large piece of wood. I could almost see the plant. I told my mom to look by the piece of wood to amuse me. She did, and she also saw the ghost. My mom freaked out, took me, my sister, and my brother out of the house and went to a neighbor's. She told my neighbor what happened, and the neighbor had lived there all of their lives, and told us that a couple of years before, a stranger came to their house asking to use the phone, and they let him. Then he pulled out a gun and shot at everyone there and was going to use their house as a hideout because he was a convicted killer. They never found the bodies to the family that used to live there. I think that's why they hung around. We moved out immediately afterwards. What the shadow people want. We moved into our old house, which is a little over 80 years old, about 5 years ago. Our youngest son was 2 years old. He refused to go in the bathroom alone. He said he saw black eyes in there. We brushed it aside, thinking that he didn't want to be potty trained or that he just had a very active imagination. Not too long after we moved in, things would disappear from where we had just sat them down. Hairbrushes, keys, cups of coffee, etc., and then reappear in another area. We often felt like we were being watched. I would feel taps on my shoulder as I worked on the computer. My children would come to me and say, "What?" because they thought I had called them, but I had not. One of my sons and I were in the kitchen talking as I did dishes. From across the room, a box of cereal flew from the top of the refrigerator, hit the window over the sink, and fall into the sink. We just stared at each other without saying a word. I began to see a large, dark figure going from the bathroom into the hallway and through the wall and back again. My husband doesn't believe in spirits. Well, he didn't, but he saw it too. The kids began telling us that they saw a large black thing walking around the house. We had not told them what we had seen. One night, a friend of mine came over and we were watching a ghost cam online. The lights were out in the computer room. All of our kids were over our shoulders looking at the cam with us. The lights turned on. Thinking it was one of my kids, I said, "Hey, turn them back off." The lights went off. My friend said that she kind of liked them on. Instantly, the lights came back on. One of the kids said, "Whoa, who did that?" We turned around to see all of the kids right there with us, nowhere near the light switch. I said, "Well, I want the lights off," and they turned off again. One night, I was in my bed watching TV. My husband was at work. My two youngest boys were asleep on the sofa in the living room. My daughter was at a sleepover and two of my older sons were watching TV in the living room. My son came in to ask me if I had heard anything. I laughed and said no. I asked him if he was watching a scary movie and got spooked. He said no, they were watching Family Guy. I told him he was being paranoid. He came back in a few minutes later and asked me to come into the living room. Ticked as I was, I went in and started working on a sewing project just so I could keep busy while waiting on them to feel more comfortable or fall asleep. Both boys looked frightened as they said, "Mom, did you hear that?" I had the sewing machine going, so I hadn't heard anything. I sat and waited about 5 minutes. Nothing happened. I started sewing again, and they stopped me. Again, I was really ticked by then. Frustrated, I began putting up my sewing project. I was stopped by a very loud thud from the second floor above me. The boys kept asking me if I heard that. I blamed it on the cats. My son pointed to the two sleeping cats on the floor. Before I could come up with another logical explanation, it happened again, and again, and again. For about an hour, we heard continuous sounds of banging thuds and the sound of furniture moving on the wood floors upstairs. We attempted to go up the stairs just to see what was going on, but honestly, we were just too afraid to go up even the first step. Finally, the sound stopped. The boys fell asleep and I stayed awake until my husband came home at about 6 a.m. He asked me why I was up so early. I told him that I hadn't been to sleep. I was hesitant to tell him what had happened since he really did not believe in hauntings or spirits, despite having seen the dark figure before. He asked me what was wrong. I told him. He laughed and headed up the stairs. I was right behind him. He stopped before the last step. I looked around his shoulder and saw that our oldest son's room had been demolished. Box springs were off their bed, the mattresses were leaning on the walls, the dresser was in the middle of the room, with a TV on top of it. Toys, books, papers, and clothing were strewn all over the room. Without speaking, we cleaned the room. I talked to a friend about it and she suggested that we use white sage to cleanse the house. I also did a lot of Googling about hauntings. I took my digital camera upstairs in the dark and took pictures where I felt funny or cold. When I came downstairs, I also took a picture of my fireplace because I had always felt funny there. Nothing showed up on the LED screen of my digital camera, but I uploaded the pictures anyway. We saw orbs everywhere. In one area of the upstairs hallway, it looked like a galaxy of sorts. Hundreds of orbs all around. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a red blob. The photo of the fireplace showed a white woman in what appeared to be a bathrobe of sorts, and she was very bright white. Wanting to make sure that I didn't suggest to anyone what it looked like, I just showed friends and family the photo. Everyone said it was a woman. We went and got some white sage and burned it all over the house, outside, inside, everywhere. Things calmed down. I was talking to a neighbor and she said that devil worshippers had rented our house before we moved in. She said very odd sounds came from the house and that after they had been evicted, the neighbor and her husband had come to visit the owners while they were cleaning and were horrified to see demonic graffiti sprayed on all of the walls. I thought that explained it and was glad we had cleansed the house. Within a couple of months, it started back again. My daughter yelled for us one night. We ran up there and her new television was flipping channels. I told her she was sitting on a remote. She pointed to her nightstand. It was there. I took the batteries out. The TV continued switching channels. The next day, our older boys yelled for us. We ran up to their room and were astonished to find that every channel was French-speaking. We don't have satellite TV, just cable. We don't live in a French-speaking area or normally have French-speaking television channels. We turned off the TV. Our bathtub began running water while nobody was even in that part of the house, and our toilet would flush on its own. I had a self-cleaning oven. You know, when you slide the lever to lock the door, to turn it on for the self-cleaning, how it makes a buzzing sound? While we were in the living room watching TV, the buzzing sound began happening over and over. We walked into the kitchen to see the lever going back and forth very quickly, and the digital clock control was changing from numbers to letters to symbols at a furious rate. We stood there watching this in silence for almost 5 minutes. My kids looked terrified, so I felt I had to take control somehow. I yelled in a very stern voice, "Knock it the fuck off!" Immediately, it stopped and the oven door completely fell off onto the floor. I inspected the door. It looked as if the metal semicircular hinges had been cut. I tried to talk to the spirits. I don't know why, but I feel one is the elderly lady who had grown up here and inherited the house. I have no idea who the dark one is. I said that they could stay if that is what they wish to, but please not to frighten our family anymore. I said that they would be happier if they went to the other side. Thinking I felt a little foolish for talking to them, I stopped. I began feeling very depressed and sad. I felt like crying. At that point, I began a 3-month battle with deep depression. I just felt so hopeless, and there was no real reason. My life was great. My family was great. There was no real reason for my sadness. When we would leave, I felt much better. If we went away for a weekend, I would be fine until we returned to the house. I loved this house, so it wasn't my living situation that was depressing me. I'm working through, and I seem to be getting better after I acknowledged that maybe I was feeling sadness from the spirits. My kids have been seeing the dark thing again. Nat seems to like the area of our foyer and living room, kitchen, bath, hallway. My daughter, who does not believe at all in spirits, says she saw it standing at the foot of her bed. A lot of visitors to our home say they feel kind of freaked out. We don't tell people what goes on here, so they don't have any preconceived ideas of a haunted house. They just say that they feel frightened or as if something is watching them. My daughter's friend is spending the week with us. She said she felt a very cold spot in the living room. I felt it where she pointed it out. I brought a stool into the area and sat there. My back got cold. My son and the friend touched my back and it was ice cold. My face, hands, arms, and legs were warm. She knew nothing about our issues here. She said that earlier when she had taken a bath, she got creeped out and felt she was being watched. She hurried and rinsed the soap off and ran out of the bathroom. I asked her if she felt funny anywhere, and she kept talking about the fireplace. For the past 4 months, I have awoken with very deep burning scratches on my arms, legs, back, and face. I have scars from some of them. They burn. Usually they are in groups of 3s. Almost always, the middle one is the deepest. I do not have fingernails, and there is nothing in my bedding that would cause scratches. It's not our cats either. We don't have the cats anymore. We have a dog, but she sleeps in my son's room. Sometimes she stops suddenly and growls at nothing. I don't know if I'm being singled out because I did the sage so it hates me now, or if it is ticked because I am not afraid of it. I don't know why I am the one being scratched. I'm leery of trying the sage again because I don't want it to piss it off again or provoke it to do more. My mom wants us to move out of here. I don't know if it would follow us or not. So for now, we are just dealing with it, but I don't know how long we could do that. Nancy's house. My cousin Nancy and her husband moved into their first home. I went over to help them unpack and clean up. The very first time I set foot into that place, I felt uncomfortable, like all eyes were staring at me. I told my cousin about this. She said I would feel better once they had unloaded the boxes and made the house feel cozier. She did say, "It's just a little empty in here, that's all." I ignored that feeling and tried not to think about it. Several weeks went by and Nancy called asking for my mom. After my mom got off the phone, my mom said there had been an accident at Nancy's and we had to go over there right away. When we got to her house, inside was pitch black. I was very concerned when I didn't see their car in the driveway. My mom banged on the door. No one came to open. It wasn't like we lived far from her either. It was only a 10-minute drive, so Mom and I went back home. The next morning, my mom called Nancy. A woman's voice answered. My mom asked if this was Nancy's house and if she was home. The woman said she'd been living there for 15 years and asked if this was a joke. She also said there was no one by the name of Nancy that lived in the house. My mom checked the telephone number again. It was indeed Nancy's number. So I tried calling the same number. No one picked up. I tried a third time. The same woman picked up and said I got the wrong number. A week later, I ran into Nancy at the supermarket. I asked her if her mother-in-law had moved in because whenever I called, an old lady kept answering. Nancy turned white in the face. She said she had left to live with her mother-in-law about 2 weeks before because her house was haunted. She told me about seeing an old lady walking around their house, whispering to herself, then disappearing when Nancy screamed. She said that late at night she would hear the dishes banging in the kitchen or water running as if someone was taking a shower. No one else lived there except her and her husband. Nancy hired movers to get her things out of the house, and they live elsewhere, but every time I drive past that place, I get chills. Last I heard was that another couple moved in, then right out, and no one's lived there since. But some nights I'll see a light in the attic when I drive past, and I wonder if it's the ghost of that old lady. The ghost at work. Do I have a ghost at work? Well, my story begins with my aunt and I starting our own cleaning business for offices and such. We took on some subcontract work, and my Aunt Debbie eventually stopped working with me due to family commitments. However, the place we worked at initially had 3 levels, and it was quite a big job between the 2 of us. It took us almost 4.5 hours each night, 5 nights a week. At first, when Debbie worked there, not a lot happened. Mainly, you were asking me what I wanted all the time as if I had called her, which of course I hadn't. I would keep telling her I hadn't called her, and she had no idea what that was about. This went on for a few months. I, of course, was quite oblivious as to the other going-ons and had paid no attention after all. Then Debbie left, and I took on another person to help out with the workload. One night we had gone into the 2nd level, and there was this terrible stench coming from the kitchen in the common area. It had eventually taken over the entire floor. We forgot about the smell and went into the main office we cleaned. We were emptying out paper bins, and then we heard this rattling of the double glass doors. I thought it was just someone going into the office across the hall. It happened again a few minutes later, and upon investigation, we found no one. I'm sure you can appreciate how frightened we both were. This happened again. We made it downstairs to the 1st level, where we would not leave each other's sight. Bathroom, kitchens, and the whole lot got done together. I had left the keys, which is about 10 keys in total, on the table just inside the main glass doors. We went to empty the waste paper bins, and upon our return they had vanished. We checked everywhere and could not find them. We called security to escort us to our cars as we were really frightened by this stage. The next day the keys were found by the staff in the men's bathroom, which happened to be the first place we looked. Many other small things went on over time, like chemicals going missing, then showing up where we had never put them in the first place. Phones would start playing the radio all by themselves and stopping as we walked away. Last night was one of the worst. The other staff members started before I did and called about 30 minutes before I got there to tell me someone, a woman's voice, had said hi, but there was no one other than her in the building. She was scared to death on the phone, so I told her to go downstairs until I arrived with my uncle, who helped out from time to time. We all went up together and nothing else happened until some hours later. I had gone down with Jody, which is the person helping me, to help her dispose of some rubbish. I then left her and said I was going up to where my uncle was to set the alarms. When I got out of the elevator, the vacuum cleaner was there, but not my uncle. I heard this laughter come from my left side behind me. When I looked, no one was there. Then my uncle came out of the glass doors on my right. I asked him what he was laughing about, but he claimed not to have been laughing. We went down the elevator to pack everything away. We have our own cleaning room where we store everything. We could not find the mop, so we all went up the elevator again to level 1 to look for it. We found it and proceeded to come down again. That's when I realized that there were 4 people in the lift, not 3. I can tell you, I have never been so frightened in my life. It was only a glimpse, but it was there. I said nothing until we reached the ground floor and thought we were safe in the cleaning room. We were sitting at the table, and this room is quite large, when Jody started to freak out about the light. When we all looked up, the whole light, which is a tube light on chains, was swinging. My uncle steadied the light and we tested to see if the closing of the door could create this. Nothing we did other than manually push the light could make it move. I have resigned today and will finish out the month, but I will no longer work in this office. I have never felt this scared of something I cannot see in my life, and I hope never to have to see it. So just in case,